Okay, in this video we're going to cover common prefixes such as those in kilobyte and megabyte and gigabyte. The prefixes are used as a shortcut to describe large amounts of bits and bytes. It's just like the metric system, which has meter and kilometer and centimeters. And if it's the imperial system, it's just like inches, feet, and miles, right? The metric system is the one that's really easy to use. Everything is factors of 10. A meter is, well, just a meter. 10 meters is a decameter. 100 meters is a hectometer. These are not terms that are used every day. But 1,000 meters is a kilometer, and that is a term that's used very, very frequently. Unfortunately, the prefix kilo or kilo in binary, kilobyte doesn't mean 1,000 bytes. This is commonly misunderstood. It actually means 1,024 bytes. Now that's just a small difference. Only 24 bytes difference between, a kilobyte and the pure thousand, right, that you would think of from kilo. But as you'll see later in the video, it actually gets a lot worse. First, let's take a look, though, at all of the prefixes and their normal values so that they're familiar. A byte is a byte, and a bit is a bit. We never cut those into pieces. So all of the measurements and prefixes regarding bits and bytes are on the larger side, bigger than 1. So we don't have like, a centibyte, right, which would be like a 1/100th of the byte. So here's a list of all of the prefixes. Kilo is 1,000, mega is 1,000,000, giga is 1,000,000,000, tera is 1,000,000,000,000. Terabyte might be a term that you're familiar with. It's recently become common for people to come across this term. Peta is 1,000,000,000,000 and exa is 1,000,000,000,000. Those are, like, petabyte is not a term that you're going to come across unless you really are in the world of computing. So these are the standard values that come with these prefixes, right, as listed. You can see this clean billion, clean million, right? That's it. So why would we do anything different for bytes than the clean regular numbers? Well, it has to do with the powers of 2. Everything in binary is based on 2 to the x, right? So I'm not talking powers like magical powers. I'm talking about powers like exponential powers in mathematics, right? So 2 to the 0th is 1, just like everything to the 0 power is 1. And then 2 to the 1st is 2, it's itself. 2 to the 2nd is 4. 2 to the 3rd is 8. 2 to the 4th is 16. And as we go up, we reach the following numbers: 256, 512, 1,024. So 1,024 is 2 to the 10th, by the way. So does that look familiar? Maybe you've bought a memory card for your camera, right? Or something similar that was 512 megabytes. That's the way the computer technology is. Down on the microchip level, everything is in line with this 2 to the x pattern. So that means that the original prefix values for kilo, mega, giga, they wouldn't line up. So it was decided that the same words would be used, but the quantities would be adjusted. And so for bytes, the official amounts are: a kilobyte is, as I've said, 1,024 bytes. A megabyte is 1,048,576 bytes, which also happens to be 1,024 kilobytes. A gigabyte is 1,073,741,824 bytes, or 1,024 megabytes. So let's stop there for a minute because there's something important to note. Did you notice that the difference between the number of bytes in a gigabyte and the simple billion that you would think of if it was a pure, right, if giga was being used correctly, did you notice that was like way bigger than the difference for a megabyte and bigger for much bigger than the difference for a kilobyte, right, which is only off by 24? The difference actually gets bigger the more bytes that we're dealing with. So for a kilobyte, the difference is 2.4% difference. For a megabyte, it's 4.9%. For a gigabyte, it's 7.4%. And then we get up to a terabyte, it's 9.95%. It's just under 10%. So, and you may be thinking like, okay, right, so there's a difference. Who cares? It's just numbers. Does it really make a difference? And yes, it really does, actually. So when we use kilobyte and megabyte in the real world, we're usually talking about the actual number of bytes. But when we talk about gigabyte and terabytes, the numbers are often less accurate. So do you know how much storage space you're getting when you buy a 2 terabyte hard drive? It depends on what they mean by 2 terabytes or 2 TB, which is probably there on the package. If the manufacturer means 2 trillion bytes, the simple version, then you'll actually be getting 10% less than what you actually think. It's easy to do the math. Let's convert 1 trillion, simple 1 trillion bytes into the correct number of real terabytes. You can do this on your calculator if you want. So we just take 1 trillion and we divide it by 1 trillion 99 billion 511 million, so on and so forth, as you can see on the screen, which is the real number of bytes that is there in an actual terabyte. And what we get in the end is 0.9095 terabytes. So in other words, you get about 0.9 or 90% real terabytes in this situation for every simple terabyte. So for a 2 terabyte hard drive that you might have bought, that means you get 1.8 real terabytes total. That's 200 gigabytes less. I have a laptop that doesn't even have 200 gigabytes total. So that's actually a lot of information space that's missing. So, and maybe you've seen this. So have you ever bought a hard drive or a smartphone and wondered why right off the bat it seems that there's less space? Like right from the start, you plug it in and you say, I thought that was a 16 gigabyte. And somehow there's less information available or less space than you thought. This may actually be why. So, okay, well, anytime you want to find the real number of bytes in a larger measurement, there's an easier way to do it. So you can just get a calculator and do it this way. Multiply 1024 the number of times needed. For a kilobyte, it's 1 time. For a megabyte, it's 2 times. For a gigabyte, it's 3. For a terabyte, it's 4, and so on. So to find the real number of bytes in 4 gigabytes, I multiply 1024 by 1024 by 1024. That's 3 times, right, for a gigabyte. And I get the 1,073,741,000, so on and so forth. Then I can multiply that by 4, and I get 4,294,000,000, and that's the actual number of real bytes in 4 gigabytes. So that's an easier way to do it. So, okay, there's 2 last things that I want to cover. The first has to do with network speed. On your home Wi-Fi device, you might have seen something like 100 Mbps. A common misconception is that means you can transfer 100 megabytes every second. Unfortunately, that's megabits per second, not megabytes. So the speed is 8 times less. There's 8 bits in a byte, remember? So when it's a lowercase b, it's bits. And when it's an uppercase b, it's bytes in all of the abbreviations. And so another name for a byte, by the way, is an octet. That means 8 bits because of the prefix oct, like in octagon. And a byte almost always means 8 bits. That's almost all of the time. Technically, though, a byte can be any size. An octet is always 8 bits. So that's just a little extra information. So for networking speed, we can do the conversion like we did earlier for the terabytes there. So we divide the number that we're looking for there, or that we are given, by 8 to account for the bit to byte conversion. And then we'll know how much information is really moving per second. So 100 million bits, so 100 megabits, as you remember, 100 Mbps, divided by 8 is 12,500,000 bytes. And so since 1 real megabyte is 1,048,576, which is, if you remember, 1,024 times 1,024, right, to do it the easy way, we then divide the 12,500,000 by that, and what we get is we get 11.92 real megabytes. So to put it simply, you're getting 12 megabytes per second. That's actually still really fast. So, okay, now the last thing. With all of this confusion between like a true gigabyte and the smaller kind, right, which is the simple gigabyte, why don't we have a better way to talk about it? Why are we even using these weird terms? Well, we do have a better way, but nobody uses it. I think you should know about it, though, because you will see it written sometimes, and you never know. In the future, and possibly even the near future, it might become common, and then you'll know what you're talking about. But since 1998, we've actually had a set of prefixes that deal specifically with large amounts of binary information. So let's look at the first one. If you combine the words kilo and binary, you get kibi. Kibi is the official prefix that means exactly 1024. So a kibibyte is 1024 bytes, which is exactly what we're looking for. It's totally correct. And the abbreviation is capital K, lowercase I for the prefix, and then capital B for byte. So the ki is for kibi, and note that the k in kibi is uppercase. The k in kilo is lowercase. So here are the other prefixes and their abbreviations. So megabyte, capital M, lowercase I, is 1024 times 1024, right? 1024 squared. Gigabyte, right, for the billion range there, and tebibyte for what we commonly refer to as a terabyte, which is 1024 to the fourth. So these are the official prefixes and terms that are created by the International Electrotechnical Commission. They are used so rarely that these words even come up as misspelled on many spell checkers. For a computing technology term to come up misspelled in a spell checker, it must not be actually used in public. And you probably have never heard of them. Maybe you have, but it's not common. So you'll sometimes see a product with the official IEC abbreviation on it. This is good news. If you see an external hard drive with two capital T, lowercase I, capital B, so 2 TIB, you know it's the full 2 terabytes. You're getting more information. So anyhow, let's wrap this up. When it comes to bits and bytes, we measure them like the metric system, except the math is a bit off. It's all based on powers of 2. 2 to the 10th is 1024. Depending on whether you're buying a hard drive or trying to see how many digital pictures you can transfer in a minute, these numbers can be really important. But if you're not, then you can just say 2 gigabytes is 2 billion bytes, and that's good enough. So, but now you have the real story.